Good morning, everyone. It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And being part of that collaboration in 2022 and 2021, reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live on March 27th. Yes, March is coming to an end, family. Based here in the Greater Toronto area. It's raining, snowing. It's just outside. My dad would call it, this is a day of night, son, a day of night. But we are shining bright on the morning vibe. I want to say thank you for everyone who is dropping by. And please put in the chat where you're chiming in from. Would really appreciate that. So hope you had a good weekend if you're watching this live. And let me just do something here. There we go. Other side. There we go. That's better. I had to clean that stuff off my mouth. Just got to look presentable, you know? Got to look presentable. So Ryan is not with us this morning, unfortunately, so I'm doing it hand solo today. So looking forward to another epic conversation. We have another new, well, not a new friend to me, but probably a new friend to all of you today on the Dr. Vibe Show. I've met this gentleman probably about 2 years ago. He was a group of a number of Black men that wrote a book called, and I hope I get this right, he'll probably lick me if I don't, called New Me. And it was that a group of Black men wrote a very powerful Black book together. Each one of them had a chapter together on their journey. It was a very powerful book, and hadn't heard from him for a minute. And then all of a sudden I say, oh, wow, he's continuing to do great stuff, but now he's specifically targeting Black youth and Black youth employment. And for when Ryan comes on, Ryan, if you don't know, has a company called Detailing Nights, and he's very proactive in regards to getting employment of young Black individuals for the summertime. Well, we have a gentleman that's focusing all the time on Black youth employment. So let's bring him up. He's, like I said, known him for a while, but now I'm going to get to know him better. Mr. Chris Duff. He is the executive director of the Canadian Council for Youth Prosperity. Mr. Duff, how are we doing this morning?
I am very good. I am blessed, black, and highly favored, Dr. Vibe. How are you?
Outstanding. Great to have you on this morning. Thanks for taking time. Big shout out to Wendy at Convo Media for making this happen. She reached out to me. Do you know Chris? Da, 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 da. And I didn't say anything. She came back and says, so you know Chris. I said, I know one or two people around. So really happy to have you on the conversation this morning. And it's really interesting in our journey on the morning vibe. We've had a number of different conversations talked about. And, you know, the only time Black youth unemployment or Black youth employment comes up is when Ryan mentions his initiatives with his organization, Detailing Nights. So it's good that we'll have someone today that's going to focus directly on it. But before we get there, can you give a little bit of your background to our Morning Vibe show family?
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for having me on, Dr. Vibe. And you did get the name right. It was New Me. The book was called New Me. So awesome.
All right.
But hello, everyone. So my name is Christopher Duff, as Dr. Vibe had mentioned, and I'm the executive director of the Canadian Council for Youth Prosperity. And my background is in youth development and empowerment, really focusing on helping young people develop the skills that they need, the competencies that they need, and the tools that they need to successfully navigate life. In addition to that, I'm incredibly passionate about financial education and really helping folks learn how to make money, manage their money, and then build generational wealth. And I would say, I get that sort of, it sounds like it's two separate worlds, but really the point of convergence there is around a desire to want to see people prosper. And so that's a bit about about myself.
All right, we're going to just take a quick little break here because we got to give a shout out to a big friend of ours. Well, it's a friend every day of the week, but especially on Mondays. Just want to share with everybody this episode of the Morning Vibe, and it seems like every Morning Vibe on Mondays is brought to you by the McMillan Group, real estate mortgages and mortgages made simple. There can be found at 905-813-4354 or in the US 904-586-5636. And remember that they've been providing mortgage solutions one client at a time since 1999, buying, refinancing, or investing. Call them at those two numbers, and you will get not only real estate questions resolved, but general business questions. I did share a few weeks ago that I had two different business owners, Black lady business owners, introduced into Ray, and Ray provided them so much clarity. So for people who may or may not know, Ray's been involved with mortgages since 1999, but that means he gets a vision on all different types of businesses and all different types of people. And before that, he was in the banking industry. So I put the information there, both phone numbers, Canada, US, and even their toll-free number and their website and email address. So thank you, as always, the McMillan Group, for providing sponsorship for the Dr. Vibe Show. It's appreciated and not taken for granted, the Dr. Vibe Show and the Morning Vibe. So want to make that. It's interesting you mentioned about financial, especially in a capitalistic society, is foundational.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Money makes the world go round. No,
Or whether we like it or not, as I share with a lot of people. Yeah, like I share with a lot of people, I think before we think we live in a democracy, we live in a capitalistic society.
That's right. That's right.
So let me ask you, where did you get your passion to really focus in on youth? I might say prosperity, because employment's part of it, but youth prosperity. Where did you get that drive from?
It's an interesting question. So I think a lot of it had to do with my own personal experience, feeling that the lack of opportunities that I felt that I had, the lack of access that I felt that I had, and then sort of promising myself when I was younger, maybe late teens, early 20s, that when I get an opportunity, I want to be the type of mentor that I felt that I did not have at that time. And so that was really that was really the impetus for me to want to get into this work and to really want to pour back into young people the way that I felt that I needed when I was a young person.
Fantastic. Just going to catch up a little bit here. We got some people saying hello. We got regular members of the Family Fitness IQ Cam, and also have Christopher Lawrence in the house. Good morning. Good morning. She also says, yes, I learned so much when I spoke to Raymond. Absolutely. Raymond McMillan is someone I recommend everyone who I know, you should have a conversation with him, because he wants to serve and see us be better. Getting back to your journey, so when did the light turn on saying, okay, my experiences haven't been great. What can I do to help those who haven't had that experience? Do you remember that moment at all?
So I don't remember the specific moment, but there was a period of my life when I was working at a McDonald's, actually, and I was one of the assistant managers at this McDonald's, and I was 26 or 25 at the time, I think it was, and we had a workforce. We were one of the highest producing restaurants from a revenue perspective in the GTA, in the province, really, and it was interesting because I was 26 at the time, 25 or 26 at the time, and our workforce, so that the amount of staff that we had was about 130, I believe, and I would say 98% of them were under the age of 25. And so, though I was a manager at the restaurant, I also became sort of like a life coach or a coach because I'd seen young people sort of coming in with so many varying degrees of challenges that they were experiencing at that time, whether it was boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it was family, whether it was OSAP, whether it was education, whether it was schooling, whether it was financial. And so I found that there was this significant gap that many young people were experiencing in terms of not having that level of support, not having the appropriate support to help them navigate life. And so I think it was that sort of 4-year stretch that really showed me firsthand the many challenges, not just what I was facing, but many of the youth were facing. And so that really prompted me or propelled me to actually launch my one of my first companies, which was called Inspired Initiatives, which was really a youth development organization that was really focused on helping young people develop the tools, skills, and the knowledge they need in order to thrive in their life. And so that was really the impetus for me to get into a lot of this youth development work.
Okay. Let's see if you can cycle back in regards to what were the first few years of Inspired Initiatives like?
Oh, rough. No, you
Okay.
know why? So it's interesting. So I had launched Inspired Initiatives at while I was working at McDonald's. So I was doing it part-time, and I would essentially just take some of the young people on a Sunday. I would rent out some office space in downtown, and I would just deliver these workshops around career development. I would deliver workshops around financial literacy, and I would bring guests in and all those sorts of things. And then I recognized that there was an actual business case there. So I decided to, rightly or wrongly, I decided to leave McDonald's, which was a very secure job at that time. You know, you have benefits, you had a decent salary at the management level at least. And so I decided to leave McDonald's at that time. I had saved up about maybe 6 months worth of my expenses in hopes that by that time I would at least have some level of income coming in. I did not. And so I was struggling for a significant amount of time of trying to make this business work. And then eventually, things definitely began to catch on. I got into the education system. I was working with the Ministry of Education on a number of projects, working with community organizations, working with churches, and I was everywhere. Myself and the organization, we were everywhere, and we were really trying to empower young people to take control, but also give them the tools that they need in order for them to succeed. But yeah, those first 2 years, they were challenging, incredibly challenging.
When did it begin to turn?
It was with the contracts with the Ministry of Education. That's when things really took a turn, because not only financially were we able to generate some income, but there was visibility across the school boards in Ontario. And so that was definitely the turning point. Definitely blessed to begin working with the ministry. As a matter of fact, we were working with the ministry on a number of forward-thinking initiatives. So there was something called the Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship Initiative that they had, that was a very early stage, really focused on helping people develop sort of the design thinking skill sets and become more innovative and better prepare them for the 21st century workforce. And so it was very sort of future looking and forward thinking. So it was definitely a blessed opportunity to work with the ministry on that.
Are you still running that organization at this time?
No, not quite. It's more so I sort of handed it off to some other younger folks to continue to deliver the work while I focus on other areas.
Okay, so what did you do between the time of handing that property off, and this organization, the Canadian Council for Youth Prosperity?
It was actually a seamless transition. So
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So it's interesting, and I guess I'll share a bit about the organization in a moment. But one of the challenges that I was having running the organization, the Inspired Initiatives, was that I felt personally that I was hitting sort of this ceiling. I was, humbly as I can say, I was great at mobilizing at the grassroots level. But the challenge that I was sort of bucking up against was that I did not understand how the system worked. I did not understand how policy was designed. I did not understand how sort of the systems level thinking operated. And so I felt that I needed an opportunity. I had a choice. I either could go back to school to learn a bit more about how governance works and how the government works and how the system works and how policies are designed, or I could try to find a job where I could sort of get on the job training of sorts and get that sort of fast track education. And then it just so happened that the opportunity with the Canadian Council for Youth Prosperity opened up, and I was originally brought on as the director of youth engagement, which was right in my wheelhouse. And so this company gave me the opportunity and the exposure to learn more about how the system operated. Because I remember Obama once saying, grassroots change and mobilization is phenomenal, but if you cannot crack the nut at the systems level, then there's only a certain amount of change that can actually happen. All right. And so that was where sort of the dichotomy that I was sort of in. So yeah, it was a seamless transition.
Good stuff. Well, as you've just shared with us, tell us a little bit about the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Canadian Council for Youth Prosperity, and we are on a mission to ensure that young people across Canada live and work in both purpose and prosperity. And we do this by working collaboratively with various stakeholders within the youth employment space. So, employers, employment service providers, governments, government agencies, academic institutions, to really identify and address gaps that prevent young people from thriving in the labor market. So I know earlier you mentioned, Dr. Vibe, that I work exclusively with Black youth. I actually work with youth broadly, but with the project that I'll be speaking on today, it's specific to Black youth. And so one of the things that we like to say up front is that we are not actually a service provider, right? So we are not in the business of offering services directly to young people unless we are, testing a new, framework or model or conducting research. But core to our mission is a belief that if we can help the many players across the sector coordinate better, design better, and put them in a position to better deliver on their mission, then a derivative of this would be better employment outcomes for young people, specifically those who are furthest away from the labor market. And so our work is categorized into three sort of broad areas. The first being convening and connecting. And so where we bring players from across the sector together to have very intentional and meaningful dialogue as it relates to gaps, challenges, and opportunities across the youth employment space. The second area is knowledge mobilization, where we really focus on disseminating insights, learnings, and research to the broader sector. And then the last being capacity building, where we offer a suite of services to stakeholder in the sector focused on youth engagement and research.
I bet you about 2 years ago, when you didn't have governance under your hat, you couldn't have riled that off so easily.
Not one bit.
I said, man, wherever he went for his governance training, he got it. He got it.
It's true.
That's full force governance there.
That's right, man. That's
good
right.
stuff. Good
That's
stuff.
right.
I want to get, so let's target it more. You have this program, Black Seed. What's it all about? And then I want us to talk a bit more, really talking about some of the challenges when it comes to Black youth unemployment. But let's talk about the Black Seed program.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Black Seed Project it really seeks to improve employment outcomes for Black youth by building the capacity and capability in B3 organizations, particularly those who are in service to young people. And so I just want to take a step back and just define, put a few definitions out there. So when I refer to B3, I'm referring to Black serving, Black led, and Black focused organizations. And when I say that we want to build capacity, or the project seeks to build capacity in these organizations, what I'm referring to is their evaluation capacity, their research capacity, building their fundraising capacity, maybe their knowledge mobilization capacity, business development, or even their governance capacity. And I think it's also important to note that when we talk about building or improving employment outcomes for Black youth, it's not just about getting Black youth a job to check a box. It's about also considering the quality of these jobs. Like, is there a skills match? Are they adequately compensated for their level of expertise and education? Are there career advancement opportunities? What does the training and development look like on these on these jobs? And so the question now becomes, well, what's the linkage between employment outcomes for Black youth and B3 organizations? And the reality is that many of these organizations are the boots on the ground, right? They have acute sensitivity to the various challenges and barriers that many Black youth face. And in some cases, it could be because they've had lived experience with some of those challenges. They also have the passion and the expertise to deliver, culturally sensitive or culturally informed interventions. And I think one of the more important pieces is that they also have a vested interest, right? Like, so these are individuals or organizations that they recognize the inextricable link between the success of Black youth in employment to the success of the broader Black community. And so the belief is that by supporting B3 organizations to, collaborate better, to design better, to convene better, they become better positioned to deliver on their mission. And as such, a derivative of this would be, again, better improved employment outcomes for Black youth. And so that's sort of in a nutshell the Black Seed Project, really working with the B3 organizations as critical vehicles to improving the employment outcome for Black youth.
Excellent. So how long has the organization been around, and how long has the Black Seed program been operating?
Yeah. So the organization was founded officially or incorporated officially in April of 2020. But the company had been sort of operating unofficially since I believe it was maybe late 2018 or early 2019. Now, with respect to the Black Seed Project, so we had actually launched back in December of 2022. So it's a fairly new project. And I would say that we are in, if it's okay if I can sort of share where we are in the project right now, I would say that we are in phase 1 of the project. And we're really focused on building the capacity of knowledge mobilization within these B3 organizations. And when I say that knowledge mobilization is industry jargon, but it essentially means turning your knowledge into action. And so we've convened, a number of these organizations, consider it a coalition of sorts, to really help answer the question of, within the B3 sphere, how do we share what we know? Like, how does information flow across the B3 network? And what we are seeking to understand is, what are the community approaches to knowledge mobilization among B3 organizations? And I'll share why this is actually important in a moment. But the overarching goal is to develop, test, and deploy a knowledge mobilization framework that can be shared among these B3 organizations. Now, the reason why this is incredibly important is because there are incredible innovations and ideas that are happening across these organizations. It is our belief that there are community-oriented solutions that exist within these organizations. The challenge is, though, that they are often confined to the individual organization. They are not widely adopted. And in many cases, if they were widely adopted, these innovations, if they were widely adopted, it could significantly help to improve employment outcomes for Black youth. And so the question now becomes, well, how do we help these organizations not just share this information or this knowledge or these innovations, but how do we help them to also adopt these innovations? And so that's sort of the phase that we are in right now. And if I can sort of give you a bit of a visual, if you think of sort of the innovation curve, and so, like normal distribution, or the bell curve, I should say. So the bell curve that kind of goes up and goes around like that. It's similar to the innovation curve, where essentially it suggests that if you look at the left tail of that curve, you have the innovators. These are the folks that are producing the innovation. So think of these folks as, the team at Apple, for instance. I'm actually a Samsung guy or Android guy, but think of these folks as the team at Apple, right? So these folks are the ones that. So these folks,
I've been told that they take better pictures than Apple, so I'm a Samsung guy too.
There we go.
I was at an event a few weeks ago for Foodpreneur Labs, and there was a lady there saying, "Can you take a picture with my Apple phone?" I said, "Sure." She goes, "Oh, you got a Samsung? Oh, I wish." She goes, "I'm jealous." I said, "Hey, all right." And I didn't pay a mortgage for my Samsung phone, but that's not
exactly.
the question. Let's go. Sorry for the interruption. I just slid it in there.
No problem at all. But so if you look at the innovation curve, the left tail of the innovation that innovation curve is the innovator. So these are the folks like again at Apple or at Samsung or Google that are producing the innovation. Then the second sort of segment is the early adopters. So these are the folks that would typically, they would be lining up at the Apple store to get the latest and the newest iPhone, for instance, or whatever product they release. So they're the early adopters. Then you have the early majority, and then you have, which again, sort of this is where it becomes a bit more widely adopted. And then you have the late majority, and then you have the laggards. And so think of the laggards as sort of, the folks that are just now joining Facebook, as an example. Probably not a good example, but humor me for a moment.
TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah, that's right. So the idea here is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, how do we help these organizations go from being sort of early adopters of these innovations and these ideas and these community-oriented solutions to that early majority where we can get wider adoption across the B3 network? Because again, our belief is that there are solutions that are happening that can solve real challenges with Black youth unemployment. And if we can just not even necessarily introduce anything new, but if we can just get these organizations sharing more broadly and helping them to adopt, then we put them in a much better position to deliver on their mission. So that's sort of where we are with the project at this point.
Okay. Take a little bit of a quick break here. As always, if you want, please, if you're up to it, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. If you do it on YouTube, also hit the notification bell so you get notified about upcoming epic conversations like this one. And for people this week, I'm doing at least 4 more conversations this week. So, and all of them are going to be epic, by the way. Also, I'm going to put up some information here where you can find out more information about the Black Seed program. There, the website, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, etc., etc. Christopher, question. So your audiences are Black youth, but it's also, from my understanding, your audiences are also organizations too.
That's correct. That's
So,
correct.
what are the okay? Let's say, what are the challenges that Black youth are facing when it comes to employment from your lens? And also, people are watching live and on replay. Please chime in on this because I know the family we have, we want Black youth employment and unemployment to really be addressed. So, go ahead, Christopher.
That's right. No, thank you for the opportunity again. So, the challenges that Black youth face as it relates to employment. So, I'll start first with sort of a statistic. So, um, Black youth ages 15 to 24, their unemployment rate is 23.1%. Now, that number means nothing unless you compare it to, or unless you put it into context with the Canadian average. And the Canadian average for youth between the same age group is 15.5%. So that's almost a 10% difference, right? During the pandemic, it was significantly worse. So the Black youth unemployment rate was 30.6%. So I want you to think that one in every three Black youth were unemployed during the pandemic, and that's almost twice the rate of non-visible minority youth, which was 15% at that time. And so, some of the barriers that many young people face, and unfortunately, these are not new. Like this is the sad part, at least for me, sort of now coming into this space. Like these are not new barriers. Like these have been systemic barriers for decades, and these are the things that have been that many folks that before me have been constantly fighting for. So discrimination in the hiring process. That's a huge one. So interestingly, there was a study that was done that was looking at employer responses to resumes of similarly qualified candidates, right, with both African last names and Franco-Quebecois last names. And unsurprisingly, the candidates with the Franco-Quebecois last names were called for an interview 38.3% more often than those with African names. Like that's just in the hiring process that you haven't even gotten the job yet and you're already being discriminated against. I know of some situations, specifically to Toronto, but anecdotally, I know of situations where some folks were being discriminated based on their postal code, just based on their postal code alone, right? And so that's just in the hiring process itself. Now, in the workplace, as I'm sure all of your listeners know, we have anti-Black racism in the workplace, and this often affects their recognition for achievement, access to opportunities for career advancement, or even job stability, right? Even job stability. There was a study that was done that suggested that I believe over 90% of this is Black Canadians broadly. This is not just Black youth, but 90% of Black Canadians experience race-based discrimination in the workplace, and it's not just sort of the the overt racism, the use of the N-word or something like that. It's the covert racism, the racial microaggressions, right? The questions about or the subtle remarks about Black women's hair, for instance, or about whatever else, but it's the covert, that racial microaggression as well that also has an impact on the upward mobility of not just Black youth but Black Canadians broadly. And I think it's also important to note that for specifically for Black youth who have immigrated here. So I don't have the exact statistic in front of me, but it's somewhere to the order of, like, I believe it's over 50% of Black youth that are in Canada were actually immigrated here from another country, and so they discriminate. And don't quote me on that number; I might be wrong, but hopefully someone in the chat can correct me there. But the point is that there are Black youth who have immigrated here from other countries, and though they may speak the official language, they may speak with an accent, and they often get discriminated against or judged, or whatever the case is. In other scenarios, there's a lack of recognition for previous education or even work experience or even credentials from another country. So there's so many barriers, and again, these aren't. I'm not saying anything new here. Unfortunately, I'm not saying anything new here. These have been long-standing barriers for decades, since we've been in this country. And I think one other point that I'd like to make is that Black youth are often underrepresented in managerial positions, and they're overrepresented in low-paying, temporary, precarious work, and that. And I can't find the right term, but it hurts. Like, to know that this is your community and we are at such a disadvantage. And if I can underscore the importance of Black youth unemployment, like when you think of the total population, total Black population in Canada, we account for 1.5 million Black people in Canada identify as Black, right? So 1.5 million people, I should say, in Canada identify as Black. Now, out of that 1.5 million Black people, it is a very young population. So the median age is 29. So I want you to think about that. The median age for the Black population, that 1.5 million, is 29, and that's versus 41, the median age of 41 for the rest of the population. And so the point here is that, and then to that point, over 50%, I should say, of the total Black population, I believe, is under the age of 35. So my point here is that if these barriers are not resolved, think about the broad implication that this has on future generations for Black Canadians, considering the fact that Black youth make up a significant portion of the total Black population in Canada. So those are some of the barriers, and I'm not an expert by any means. There are many folks that are much more versed in this topic, but whether it's anecdotally from the research that we've conducted, from the focus groups that we've hosted, there's a lot of work to be done, Dr. Vibe. Let's just put it that way.
That's definitely a lot of work to be done. So a few things. We got some great people who have given some comments. I'm going to get to them in a moment, but I just want to read some stats here. That this is from the 2021 Canadian Census. Black youth experience a higher unemployment rate compared to their non-Black, or as I'd say, non-melanated peers. Black youth with a bachelor's degree had a lower unemployment rate compared to those with a high school diploma. However, the unemployment rate for Black youth with a Black bachelor's degree was comparable to white youth with a high school diploma. Also, the number of Black youth grew by 23% from 2016 to 2021. That is a huge increase. That's like almost a 25% increase. 1 in 17 youth are Black, up from 1 in 25 in 2016. So there are more youth. And then 11.4% of Black youth are temporary workers, international students, or refugees. And then 53.6% of Black youth are born in Canada. So there's a lot of comments. I'm going to ask you to give a short answer to this, and then I'm going to go to the comments, because there's a lot of comments flying in here, because we've got really great family here. What is the definition of Black Canadian youth? From what age to what age?
Yeah, so Stats Canada defines it as 15 to 24, but within our work that we do, we define it as 15 to 29 for the Black Sea Project.
All right, so let's get to the comments. They're flying here. So good morning, Ray. Good morning, gentlemen. Insightful conversation. Christopher, thanks for what you do for changing the trajectory of our youth. Also says, postal code discrimination is very real and quite common. It usually determines race and socioeconomic status. I experienced it firsthand in the 90s. I moved and everything changed. Wayne Harris. Good morning, Wayne. Good morning. I've had the privilege to have hiring tickets. I've reached out to the community and many Blacks applied. I noticed that the resumes were not formatted well. Also, he says, I've helped them with their CVs and remove address and added LinkedIn URLs. Good morning, Latanya. Long time no chat. Christopher Duff, you're 100% on point. And Ray comes back and says, I've experienced everything that Christopher is speaking about. Sad to see not much has changed in almost 4 decades. Pointing out the barriers allows us to go around or through them. And then Wayne also says, when I work with them on their CVs and interview skills, they win. Some coaching is usually required. Quebec has no love for Blacks. That's very much true. Very much true. So another aspect, and I don't know how much you can speak to this, is how much has this impact on trauma with our Black youth?
So I want to preface by saying I don't know. I don't know. But if I were to take a guess, I can only imagine, at least hearing anecdotally, that there's a significant impact here. And I think this is one of the reasons why, especially as it relates to employment service provision. And so, Wayne, I want to give you a shout out for the work that you've done directly with young people. It is so important for Black youth to be supported by Black individuals within the community, because there is a cultural competence that many folks from other cultures may not understand or appreciate. Whereas someone who looks like you, not to say that we're all the same, because we're not monolithic in any way, but there's at least, at the very least, a baseline understanding. So there may be certain cultural aspects that there's an understanding around. There may be some certain race aspects that there's an understanding around. And so I think it definitely does play a huge role, which is why I think it's important to have more organizations and service providers that are of the same hue.
Okay. With our youth today, what are some of the challenges they're going through? Separate from the employment stuff, because again, you have that lens. What are some of the challenges that they're going through? We always hear reports, but you are on the front line. What are some of the challenges that they are going through?
I think one of the biggest challenges that that I see is mental health. It's mental health, and I know that there's a huge push now in the education space, in the workplace. There's a huge push to mental health, but what I often hear from folks in the older generation is, well, I've had to endure so much more, or I've had to deal with this before, and look at me, I've turned out fine. But I think the challenge that young people are facing today is that it's not just what they're going through, it's whether or not they've been helped to develop the skills or the tools that they need to navigate some of those experiences. So for instance, you often hear of, not often, but you hear of young people committing suicide because a boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with them. And some folks will look at that and say, well, man, that's silly. Like, why would you commit suicide for something so trivial? You're essentially putting a period when there should be only a comma type of thing, right? But I circle back to this idea that if you are not preparing young people with the skills they need to navigate a breakup, that can feel for them like the end of the world, right? And so I think that one of the big things that we're hearing now is around mental health, or seeing, I should say, is around mental health. But I think it's this idea. There's a lot of conversation around being resilient when in schools, in the workplace, develop your resiliency. But I did a talk at a high school the other day, and one of the things that I was suggesting to them or submitting to them is that it's not just about resilience, because resilience doesn't always require change. It doesn't always require you to grow through something. It requires you to go through it and be resilient through it, but it doesn't always require you to grow through it. And so I introduced to them this idea of anti-fragility, where where the presence of pressure, adversity, stress allows you to actually grow through something or as a result of something. And the example that I had used to them was push-ups. So I'd called one of the young people down to do, a series of push-ups, and they did it to failure. So they essentially were doing the push-ups until they could not do it anymore. And what I was submitting to them was that 2 days from now, he'll be able to do more push-ups because of the stress that his body underwent in that time. So that is the example of anti-fragility. So yeah, anyways, I went on a bit of a ramble there, forgive me. But mental health is definitely a huge one. I think social media, and this also ties into mental health as well. Social media, the impact of social media, which I don't even think that we fully appreciate or understand now, but we will see over the next 10 or so years. Social media is definitely a huge one. But yeah, I think those two for me are definitely major that I'm hearing, seeing, and feeling. And I'm sorry, and one more, Dr. Vibe, is preparation for. And I know we're trying to. You've asked the question within the context outside of sort of employment, but preparation for the future of work, I think, is another significant one. These institutions, the institutions that are designed in a way that are set up to prepare young people for the future. For their future, for the future of work, they are not keeping pace with the rapid advancements of technology. We have, generative AI is a huge, it is a huge field that is advancing at a much faster clip than anyone anticipated. You have things such as ChatGPT. What are the impacts that this technology is going to have on the workplace? And then furthering that, what is the impact that this is going to have on Black youth specifically? Because if we are already if the Black youth population is already disadvantaged from an employment perspective, what is the impact going to have? I would venture to guess that it's going to only exacerbate the unemployment rate for Black youth, or broaden that gap between the Canadian average for Black youth, Canadian average unemployment rate, and then the unemployment rate for Black youth. So preparation is going to be huge. It's a huge one that I want to highlight as well.
Okay, got a question from Wayne Harris. See, it says, getting a job is systemic. Do our kids know the system? Do they know their parents?
So from my experience, and this is just anecdotally, I have no sort of evidence to research to back this up, but anecdotally, I was hosting a focus group, Wayne, with a group of young people, and one of the things that I had asked them is, where do you turn to for support? And they said, and this was unanimous across all of them, nowhere. And if we do, then we turn to our friends. And I want you to think about that for a second. Like, they're turning to their friends for support, for knowledge, for insights, and effectively it's like the blind leading the blind, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to. And so they're not turning, they do not know the system. That is absolutely the case. They have no idea about the system. I will shout out the organizations that are doing work to educate them on the system, but they don't know anything about the system. In many cases, they don't understand that how employment, the hiring process works. In some cases, they don't understand how to put together a resume, what employers are looking for, and which is fine. Like, they're not necessarily, again, we have institutions that are supposed to be supporting them to learn about these things. But furthering that, oftentimes the parents don't know as well. And this is no slight to the parents, but oftentimes parents are not aware, and things are advancing at such a fast pace in many respects that it's tough for parents to keep abreast of some of these things as well. And so, yeah, what my view is that institutions should be where they should be bridging the gap, right, between what the parents may not know and what the young person may not know, and what the young person should know. So the parents should be the ones. I'm sorry, the institutions should be the ones to really be supporting them in that respect. So yeah, it's tough.
I just want to know, when you say institutions, what institutions are we talking about?
Post-secondary institutions, for instance, employment service providers, employment agencies, government agencies, like essentially the systems that are operating at the institutions rather, that are operating at the systems level. So the institutions that are designed to help young people get into the labor force, they should be the ones to stand in the gap to provide that knowledge that young people need.
Okay, for me, my thought process, the greatest area of wealth when it comes to melanated people is the family. So what in your lens should be happening at the family level in regards to this subject?
So I think that parents, there needs to be more frank conversations around employment opportunities. What does it look like when you get into the workforce? It's interesting because I learned about the racial discrimination that my father had through random conversations when I was over the age of 30. It never happened when I was a young person, and I think those conversations need to happen. The reality is, I'm sure that many of the melanated parents experience some level of racial discrimination on the job. Bring that forward to your child. Let them understand what they're getting themselves into. Help them understand how to navigate that experience as well, and what that looks like. Give them sort of the heads up on what that looks like. So I think conversations around employment, how to get a job if the parents know, especially in this age where a lot of things are done digitally. I think conversations around what to do when you get a job, or specifically, perhaps maybe not even just pursuing a job, but maybe pursuing self-employment, maybe coaching or encouraging your child to try their hand at entrepreneurship. I think that is a career path that is incredibly viable. But unfortunately, Black Canadians are Statistics Canada actually says that Black Canadians are less likely to be self-employed. So I think if we can continue to encourage our young people to explore entrepreneurship, I think we're doing a huge service for the future generations. And it's not even to say that maybe they don't stay in entrepreneurship, which is totally fine. Maybe they don't stay in entrepreneurship, but the exposure, the skills development that you have, the skills you acquire, the network that you develop. There's so many sort of second and third order benefits to exploring entrepreneurship than just building your own business and building generational wealth. So I think some of those would be the pieces that I would encourage families to focus on.
My man Wayne Harris is on fire. He's got another question for you. He says, when I received a CV from a white or South Asian teen, they had hundreds of volunteer hours, many recommendations. The Blacks never hit that bar. Is that racism or a lack of body of work?
Hmm. It's a good question. I think it could be. I think it could be a mix of both. When you think of the other when you think of some cultures, and the conversations that these cultures are having with their children at, whether it's the dinner table or even the expectation that some of these cultures have, some of the members of these other cultures have on their children. In some cases, it's different. In some cases, it's vastly different from the expectation that we put on some of our Black children. And so, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but yeah, some of these cultures are really pushing their kids to get out there to try things. But at the same time, in many respects, in some of these cultures, the children do not have the agency or the autonomy to choose. And so, in some cases, we're hearing of suicides in some of these cultures because the children feel like they're under this immense pressure to perform and to please their families. And if their failure is a direct reflection on the family, and so yeah, it's very nuanced. But I would definitely say that there are some cultures that really impress upon their young people, their kids, to really pursue a very specific and targeted path. Where some
Okay.
of some of those expectations are not on some of these Black children.
Excellent. Keep the comments coming, family. Live. Lots of people watching this live. So this is in great engagement. More comments are coming. So let's keep them flying. Christopher Lawrence says, preach and teach Chris Duff. Macmillan Group, excuse me, agreed that the conversation should be had. But as fathers, we sometimes bury our trauma to protect our offspring. Not right, but the internalizing allows us to cope.
Sorry,
Latanya.
Dr. Vibe, I'm so, can I touch on that for just a moment?
Sure.
I think it's such a the Macmillan Group. I don't know if that's Ray McMillan in there, but
Yep.
thank you so much for sharing that. I think it is such an incredible point. I'm 36 years old now, and I just had a conversation with my father last year around the challenges and the traumas that he experienced and how that's impacted me. And it was such an honest, candid, and very uncomfortable conversation. But it helped me to understand his challenges and his misgivings and his knowledge gaps, and help me to provide him with a bit more grace. And so I think for the Black men that are watching this, like, your sons need you. That's all. Your sons need you, and they need you to be. They need you to have those open and honest conversations, and to also do the work to heal, so that they can in turn also heal. Sorry, I just really wanted to highlight
No,
that.
no, no, no.
Thank you so much.
That's the family we have here. They come straight, right? So Latanya says that's correct. I've had those conversations candidly with my sons around racial matters. I've had on the job, and have been encouraged into entrepreneurship and a career
Yes.
in tech. The fact is that you have to do extensive research to find, resources for Black boys in particular. And then you have to keep the children motivated to participate.
Yeah.
Macmillan
Dr. Webb,
Group says,
can I
no,
mention
go,
something?
no problem. The
I think
family's on fire.
Latanya, thank you so much for that comment and the work that you're doing with your boys. I think, like, the reality is that there was and I don't know where the audience is located, but I
Most
know
of them
that
in the GTA.
okay, so then they would be familiar with the Toronto District School Board, and there was a study that was done, and I'm sure many of you are maybe familiar with this, but it was huge several years ago, where the TDSB found that there was streaming that was happening in the education space. And so essentially what that meant was that there were schools or teachers that were streaming Black students into particular fields. And so the reality here is that if we, as the Black community, or as Black families, or as Black parents, if we are not providing that level of coaching and support and direction to our young people, then somebody else will. And the challenge with that is that if someone else will, you have to determine, are they streaming individuals into careers that actually match what they're interested in or what their skill set is, or are they, or even furthering that, are they streaming them into fields that are growth fields or growth industries, or are they streaming them into fields that are lag, or that are sort of behind the curve. And so again, if we're not doing it, somebody else will effectively do it. And so it's incredibly important that we take ownership, and we, to Latanya's point, we educate ourselves if needs be to be able to stream them to the appropriate, stream them or provide the support in the appropriate direction.
Okay. McMillan Root comes back. Many organizations are reluctant to open their doors to give Black youth volunteer hours. For 2 decades plus, we have opened my office to that opportunity for Black youth, and Ray backs that. He does open his office. So I would suggest you may want to sit. If you want, I can give you on offline Ray's contact information. I am fully confident that he could add positive value to at least one youth in your program. Next up, I'm loving Fitness IQ Cam. I'm loving this conversation. I'm taking it in. Wayne is saying, excuse me, ChatGPT, Google, LinkedIn, Indeed, and Glassdoor have the answers. Are we asking these resources the questions? Are they being leveraged in your programs, skilled trades, etc.? So it's a good question. What programs and services are you offering the youth?
Yeah. Are you asking me specifically, or is that
Absolutely?
So yeah, so that's the thing. So we're not a service provider. So we don't work directly with young people. We though work with the organizations that provide the support to young people. And so our goal is to help them to deliver better on their mission, with this belief that if we can help you do better as an entity or as an organization, you will then be able to help young people. So we don't provide that particular service. But if I can speak to the idea about the skills trade, it's so fascinating, because I find that over the last, I don't even know how, decades perhaps, the skilled trades had such a bad reputation. It was like this, you don't want to go to this dirty job. You don't want to go to, be a plumber or, a technician, or, whatever the case is. But those are some of the highest paying jobs right now. And so it's interesting to see that there's now this huge push, because in many of the skilled trades, whether it's plumbing or mining or the sorts, what's happening in these industries is that the population is aging, right, and they're retiring, or unfortunately they are dying off. And so now there is a huge push to create this talent pipeline, of young people to filter them into the trades. And so some of you may have seen, again, this is specific to the Ontario context, but some of you may have seen that that the Ministry of Education had announced, I think it's in grade 11, that students can actually now segue right into an apprenticeship program in their last year of high school, and that will count towards their achieving their OSSD. And so they're trying to now, again, create this pipeline of young people to filter them into the trade. But for decades, the trades had gotten such a bad rap. So I just wanted to highlight that point that Wayne had brought forward.
Okay. But 10 years back, saying I've had to intervene in the attempts to streaming my son at the high school level. Ray is asking, Christopher, is your organization limited to parts of the GTA or the entire area?
So we are actually a national organization. So we work across the country. But as many national organizations, we do have a large footprint in Ontario. But yeah, we are a national organization. Sorry, Dr. Webb, can I? There's something that for those that may not know, there's an organization called Center for Black Professionals, Black young professionals. To Wayne's question about sort of the different programs, they do phenomenal work with Black youth. They do phenomenal work, and they're exposing them to a variety of different industries. So I just wanted to also give them a bit of a plug.
Yeah, the Center for Young Black Professionals. Yes. All right. Also, we've got here Christopher saying, will you providing info workshop on the apprenticeship industry for young people? If persons would like to connect, let me know. Great. So I guess,
great.
So would you in a request like that, would you direct them to one of the organizations you have a relationship with?
Yeah, that's correct. But I think what Christopher is saying there is that they actually provide the apprentice. They actually provide those workshops, if I'm reading it correctly.
Okay.
We would actually amplify. What we will do is we would actually amplify that work across our network, because we have visibility across the country. And so even if it's a different approach that maybe Christopher Lawrence is taking, we would actually be very keen on wanting to amplify that work.
Okay. Wayne has another question here. I find the market is very open to hiring Black girls versus Black boys. Do you see this?
That's a great question. So I don't know. I don't have that level of visibility into the hiring practices. So I'm not sure, Wayne. I'm not too sure, unfortunately.
Okay. Ray comes back. Is the negative approach to skills trades correlated to the lack of male presence in the homes of a large number of Black families? And the mostly, quote, office, unquote, employed mothers guiding their kids' future?
So I again, I am not sure. That is a loaded question, Ray. But I'm not sure. I mean, it could be. Maybe it's not. I'm not entirely sure. But I do know that broadly speaking, across the country, across cultures, across races, the skilled trades have always been seen as the dirty work, always. And there was a huge push towards STEM, and STEM was more of the what the white collar sort of work, the office job and the high paying job, the sort of the STEM field. And yeah, and it's always had that negative connotation across cultures, across races. I think it's just the way that it's been framed and marketed for the last several decades.
Okay. So Christopher Lawrence says, Chris Duff, let's connect. So Christopher,
Absolutely.
if you have time in your tour, reach out to me and I can give you Chris's information. Please. Also, it says apprentices is where we need to assist our youth with.
Yeah.
All right.
And can I just say, and I just want to highlight that point that Christopher made about apprenticeships. It's like what folks don't recognize is that with the advent of a lot of the technological advancements that we're seeing, they are coming for the jobs that we once thought it would take them longer to come for. So there's a platform that exists called Stable Diffusion. It's from a company named Stability AI, and this artificial intelligence, this AI is producing music, and it's important to understand that it's not replicating music. Like you can type in there, put it through a prompt and say, hey, give me a funk sound with a heavy bass drum, blah, 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 blah. And it will do that. And it's not producing the music based on, his other music. It's producing it based on principles from other music. And there's a huge key there. And so again, musicians, they're coming for the jobs of musicians. Models, they're coming for the jobs of a lot of white collar work, that especially with ChatGPT, it's doing a lot of work that marketers were doing. Like, so it's not just robotics or automation that's taking over the jobs of the low skilled paying workers anymore. And so when we think of sort of the skilled trades, it's almost as if it requires that field requires a level of human interaction. There's a human skill that's required there. Whereas again, it may take automation a bit more time to actually take over those jobs. So I just wanted to highlight that it's an important skill or field to get into. They often say that we'll always need skilled trades in our world, right? And so just wanted to highlight that.
Well, especially in the area I live in the greater Halton, Toronto area, there's always condominiums going up. There's always houses being rebuilt. And who knows, maybe one day the robots will come for that, but not as much yet.
Exactly.
Christopher's saying we assisted more than several youth to get into trade. So obviously you two need to chat. Wayne says, yes, electrical engineers make $100 an hour. Electricians can make $200 an hour, and much of it cash.
And if you've ever hired a whether it's an electrician or an engineer, like for them to just show up, you got to pay them money.
Yes, you're paying for their time.
Yeah.
Right, you're paying for their time. Christopher says apprenticeships change lives. I have the verbal proof to show. Says shout out to frontline workers. Wayne has another question. How important is emotional intelligence in the interview process?
Yeah, that is incredible, Wayne. Thank you for that question. So I think not just in the interview process, but emotional intelligence, broadly speaking, is incredibly important. So it is. So we have sort of hard skills, and then you have soft skills. And what we're finding across the labor market is that employers are saying that they are struggling to find young people with soft skills. So yes, they may come from education with the technical skills or the know-how, but are you good at collaborating with other individuals? Are you good at communication? Do you have emotional intelligence where you can understand how to navigate certain environments with people? Right, so it's incredibly important in the interview process to understand how to have conversation and how to read your interviewer, but it's also incredibly important on the job. And I think especially as in this era of artificial intelligence and the rise and the advent of this level of technology, you want to begin to look for skills that, especially if you have children, you want to begin to encourage them to develop the skills that machines, automation, artificial intelligence cannot do, at least not yet, the skills that they cannot do. So the creativity, the curiosity, the empathy, the emotional intelligence, the leadership, like these are human. These are skills that are unique to humans, at least for the time being. They're skills that are unique to humans. So these are the skills that are going to be at a premium, especially as automation and AI continue to take over some of these jobs that we have.
Yeah. Well, the other day I heard a commentator say that he considers the rise of AI to 10 million immigrants invading the planet.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's
So
interesting.
just a whole wave of people just going to take those jobs all at once.
Yeah.
It's like a mass wave.
Yeah.
So let's see
And
here.
it's happening faster than anyone anticipated. That's the biggest piece here.
Absolutely. Dr. Vibe, thank you for having this particular segment. Thank Wendy from Convo Media. I'm just a vessel. Christopher says there was a data set that said by 2020 more spaces would open up in trades. As per COVID, there is more spaces vacant in the trades. Absolutely. Absolutely. Tim Frey, hey, welcome, Tim. Houses coming off assembly lines already in the US and EU. Just so you are aware, fourth industrial revolution is not going away. It is not. It is not. Absolutely. Wayne Harris says, add cultural intelligence. If you're not being interviewed by a Black person, can you relate?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. But I think it's you're right, Wayne. But I also think it's important that the reality is we are not fortunate enough to only be working with our people, right, or people that look like us. And so I think a huge part of that is understanding how to navigate, to your point, other cultures, other personalities, other experiences, and being able to work collaboratively with those folks. So it's a great point, Wayne.
All right. I think we have called it a wrap. This was like we just went up the hill and we just took off. There was a lot of things discussed during this conversation today. All right. Christopher says, gotta run. I know where you're off to, Mr. Lawrence. Dr. I keep the community and the brand world. Okay. Oh God. And the brand work. All right. We got that. So Christopher, any final words you'd like to share with our family before we let you go?
Yeah, I think I would just encourage folks to read a report that was recently done. Well, December 2020, it was released called Unfunded, and essentially what it explores is the dislocation between the Canadian philanthropic sector and the Black community. And essentially, I'll give you sort of the highlights of it. But out of the total grants that were distributed between 2017 and 2018, only 0.7% of those dollars went to Black serving organizations. And across the same timeline, if you looked at the total grants that were distributed to Black-led organizations, 0.07% were actually provided there. So I said this earlier, but there's a lot of work to do. And again, the report is called Unfunded. I encourage you to read it because it gives a very stark picture of the challenges that are experiencing in the Black community and how, in some cases, this is systemic. And so this is why we're working with B3 organizations to build their capacity so that they can better deliver on their work for Black youth.
In the back channel, if you can get me a link to that report, I'd love to share that with our audience if possible. Some final words here. Good morning, Charmaine Hussey. Great conversation. We need to encourage our youth to be more prepared, especially regarding skills development and how to sell themselves in interviews. Absolutely. Christopher wants says success to you, Christopher Duff. Continued success. Wayne Harris says, thank you. Great conversation. Well, thank to all of you for making a great conversation. Like, this is the type of conversation I love. The audience drive the ship. I just steer the ship. That is beautiful. Hayden says, good morning, everyone. Nothing to add. Just thank you for this deeply relevant and useful information. Great show. Thank you, Hayden. Thank you so much. So I'm just putting it up. There's up on the screen there how you can get in contact with the organization, website, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I would be speaking at least one or two of you get in contact with Christopher in regards to this. And Christopher may be reaching out to speak to one or two of you. So don't be surprised if I reach out to you via email saying, Christopher Duff would like to chat with you. One of the things Christopher Lawrence says, sometimes in the interview process, it's not what you're saying, but how you say it. Absolutely. But also doing your research ahead of time.
Agreed.
That is very important. So, Christopher, thank you so much for taking time to be on the Morning Vibe today. Please stay in touch and remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy.
Love that. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Vibe, and appreciate you
anytime.
all.
You're welcome anytime. Take care. All right. That was epic. And family, I love man, you were on fire today. We are on fire all the time, but you took it up another level today, and we appreciate that on the Morning Vibe. So, yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. You made it happen today. Big time. Big time, big time, big time. So, we're done for this Monday's episode. A few things coming up on Friday. We have a writer from buyblacks.com. For those who may not know or have not been around for a bit, the last Friday of each month in collaboration with buyblacks.com, Black Canada's #1 online magazine. We have an article, featured writer from one of their articles coming on, talking, I can't remember off the top of my head, but this is why you follow the Dr. Vibe show on some platforms, especially YouTube. And I'd say in the next day or two, the posts will go up, but it's going to be a great conversation. So nothing much more for today. Hopefully you're going to have a good rest of the week. I know a number of people in the Toronto area are going to the Canadian Black Chamber of Commerce's Expo event today. Hope you have a good time. Unfortunately, I cannot make it, so we're not going to be there. So as always, you can watch replays of the Morning Vibe at the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and Facebook, the Afro Caribbean Business Network on Facebook and YouTube, and Ryan Oneil Knight on YouTube and LinkedIn. So a few more little things. If you want to get in touch with me, website, the drvibeshow.com, email dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, The Dr. Vibe Show, Twitter at drvibeshow, and Instagram at the drvibeshow. Two other things. Subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show, especially on YouTube. Also hit the notification button, like it on Facebook, or just like it whatever platform you are watching it on. All right? And finally, would you like to promote your business or service on the Dr. Vibe Show? Contact me at my email address, at the drvibeshow. So as we close off today, remember, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. God bless, peace, well, keep the faith. Have a fantastic week. We will see you Morning Vibe on Friday, but between now and Friday, I at least have 2 more conversations. Tomorrow night with Serena Wills and Will. Will is overcoming Lou Gehrig's disease. And then on Thursday night, Dr. Vibe's Allies, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Black men talking about Black men in time, Black men from Canada, United States, and England, talking about Black men on time. So subscribe. We are having the epic conversations. God bless, peace, well, keep the faith, and walk good.